When I saw my sister embracing a breathtaking stranger and announcing him as her fiancé, I realized my evening wasn't going to go as planned. But the true shock awaited me later when my parents demanded that I pay for their apartment. My name is Sally, and for the past 5 years, I've been working as a marketer for an electronics company. The salary is good enough for me to afford a decent one-bedroom apartment in the suburbs and save something every month towards buying my own home in the future. This has been my goal since graduating college, a place that would truly be mine. My parents are good people, but they've always lived paycheck to paycheck. My father is a truck driver, and my mother works as a nurse in a local clinic. They never had extra money, but they provided for us when we were growing up. We were not poor, just living very frugally. I also have a sister, Amber. She's now 28, 2 years younger than me, and I swear she's never held a job for more than 6 months. She dropped out of college in her junior year, which I helped pay for, by the way, and since then, it's been a series of random gigs and even more random boyfriends. Classic Amber. About 2 years ago, she appeared on my doorstep with 2 suitcases and a story about how her crazy roommate kicked her out for no reason. Yeah, right. I let her stay on my couch, which turned into my spare room, soon becoming a 3-month nightmare. "Sally, it's just a couple of friends for the evening," she'd say as I came home after a 10-hour shift to find 3 strangers lounging on my furniture, cocktails in hand. "Amber, we talked about this. No parties on weeknights," I would remind her, realizing she couldn't care less. The last straw came when I found her and some guy I'd never seen before in my bedroom, eyeing my personal belongings as if deciding what to take. That broke me. "That's it, Amber. You have a week to find somewhere else," I told her that night. Naturally, she ran straight to Mom and Dad to complain, and suddenly I was the villain. Mom called me in tears, insisting that families should always support each other. Dad took the phone and said I was being cruel, that Amber was just going through a rough patch. "A rough patch? She's 26, Dad," I exclaimed back. "When I was 26, I was paying my own bills and helping you cover Amber's college expenses." That conversation ended with a dial tone, and we didn't speak for 2 months. Eventually, things smoothed over, mostly because I was the one to apologize first, as always. But I never forgot how quickly my parents always sided with Amber over me. It was the classic story of my life. So when last week, Mom invited me to dinner on Saturday, I thought it was just another regular family dinner we had started having again. "Sally, dear, it's been a while since we've seen each other. Come around 6. Your dad's grilling steaks," Mom said over the phone, sounding cheerful. "Okay, Mom. Should I bring anything?" No, just yourself, sweetheart." I arrived at my parents' house promptly at 6 p.m. with a bottle of red wine. Mom greeted me at the door with a hug, and inside I could hear Dad and Amber talking in the living room. But there was another voice, a man's laughter I didn't recognize. When I walked into the living room, Amber was sitting on the couch with her arm around a man. She hugged Jack, a guy who looked like a model straight out of a social media feed, with flawless features and a designer shirt, behaving as though he was the event's star. "Sally!" Amber jumped up enthusiastically. "This is Jack, my fiancé." I was stunned. "Fiancé? Since when?" "3 weeks ago," Jack chimed in confidently, stretching out his hand to display a shiny ring, far too expensive for someone who seemed to drift from job to job. "Amber's told me so much about you," Jack added with a smile that felt more like a challenge. Mom beamed with delight, refilling glasses for Amber and Jack and showering them with compliments. "Isn't he wonderful, Sally? Mom said repeatedly, as if she were trying to sell me on this whole situation. Over dinner, I noticed Jack constantly interrupting everyone, steering conversations back to himself. When I shared that I was likely up for a promotion soon, he cut in with, "Oh, excellent. I was also about to start a project with a firm in Manhattan once." "And what are you doing now, Jack?" I finally asked, trying to redirect the spotlight. "Oh, I'm between gigs," he replied with a casual arrogance. "I used to do interior design, but I'm looking for something more suited to my talents now." It became increasingly clear that he was trying to impress, but everything he said seemed like a thinly veiled excuse for not working. Something about the whole situation felt off, but I couldn't quite place what it was. After dinner, Mom cleared her throat and exchanged a glance with Dad, who nodded silently. "Sally, dear, there's actually something we wanted to talk to you about. That's really why we asked you to come over," Mom began cautiously. "I thought it was to meet Jack," I said, suspiciously eyeing Amber and her new fiancé, who were now sitting quietly, staring at me with odd expressions. "Well, that too," Mom nodded. "But there's something more important." She took a deep breath, clasping her hands on the table. "Your father and I have been talking, and we think you should help Amber and Jack with their apartment." I froze, my fork mid-air. "Help them find a place?" Dad shook his head. "No. We'll cover the deposit and the first month's rent, but we thought, given your stable salary, you could pay their rent month to month, to help them get on their feet until, well, their situation improves." I looked around the table. They were all looking at me like I was a cash machine, ready to dispense money on command. "So, you want me to pay their rent every month?" I asked slowly. Mom nodded as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. "Just temporarily, until Amber and Jack find something more suitable." She glanced at Amber, who looked slightly embarrassed but still managed to hide behind her usual innocent expression. Jack, on the other hand, didn't even pretend to be bashful. He sat there, looking almost smug. "No," I said, firmly putting my hands on the table. Mom blinked as though I'd spoken in another language. "Sally, your sister needs your support. She's 28, Mom. She's an adult, and she definitely doesn't need me paying her rent." Dad's face turned red. His hand clenched into a quiet fist on the table, his patience clearly running thin. "Are you serious?" he said loudly. "Do you really think it's okay to just refuse your own sister?" I shot a quick glance at Amber, who was busy inspecting her plate, and then at Jack, who just looked offended. Neither of them made any effort to speak up, happily letting my parents fight on their behalf. "Amber can get a job like everyone else. So can Jack. 2 people should have enough income to rent a place together." Mom stood up, raising her voice. "Your sister is looking for a job. She just hasn't found one that matches her skills yet. And Jack, well, he's starting his own business, and he needs time." I almost laughed out loud. Starting his own business, I thought. Sure, a business of doing nothing and letting others foot the bill. Jack hadn't been with Amber long, and yet he already managed to manipulate my parents into supporting his lifestyle. "No, Mom, this conversation is over," I said, keeping in the frustration that threatened to boil over. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. Mom ran after me, her face twisted in anger. "If you walk out that door, Sally, and don't agree to help, there will be consequences." I stopped abruptly at the door, turned to her, and said coldly, "Good night, Mom." Then I walked out, slamming the door behind me. On the way home, My thoughts were racing. How could they expect this from me? I had always been the one in the family who handled her own responsibilities, never asking for help. When I was in college, I worked multiple part-time jobs to help fund Amber's education. I worked overtime to help my parents pay off their mortgage. And in return, they placed their expectations solely on me while Amber got to live her life however she pleased without consequences. When I got back home to my quiet one-bedroom apartment, my phone was already buzzing with texts. The first one was from Amber. "Sally, are you seriously going to leave us hanging? Be a normal sister and help." Then Mom. "I'm shocked by your selfishness today. Is this how family treats each other?" And of course, Dad. "Call your mother. She's very upset. You went too far." The last message was from an unsaved number. It was Jack. It read, "Amber warned me you'd be a problem. Guess she wasn't wrong." I turned off my phone and tossed it onto the couch. I needed silence. I couldn't let them drag me into this nonsense anymore. The next morning, I threw myself into work, determined to push the whole situation out of my mind. I finalized tweaks to a marketing campaign, prepared my weekly report for management, and attended meetings with partners. With the year-end reviews approaching, I knew I had a solid shot at a promotion. And apparently, all my hard work paid off. On the day of the reviews, I was called into the office of the general manager. My boss smiled at me and handed me an envelope. "Sally, you've had an outstanding year. Your contributions to the marketing campaigns have brought in significant growth for the company. This is a bonus, a token of our appreciation." I opened the envelope and gasped. The amount was far beyond what I had expected, nearly double what I'd received in past bonuses. This money was the final step toward my ultimate goal. I finally had enough to buy my own home. That evening, I called my old college friend Emily, who worked as a real estate agent and had been helping people find their dream homes for years. "Emily, I think I'm finally ready to buy my own place. Can you help me?" "Sally, that's amazing. Of course I can. Let's meet up. I'll show you some options." Over the next few weeks, Emily showed me listings until we found the perfect one. A one-bedroom unit in a quiet neighborhood overlooking a garden with a recently renovated kitchen. It was everything I had been dreaming of, a place I could truly call my own. "This is the one. I'll put in an offer for you today," Emily said with a smile. I didn't tell Mom and Dad about my purchase. I knew that if I said even a word, they'd come with another ridiculous idea, like having Amber and Jack move in with me. But what happened the following Saturday was beyond anything I could have expected. There was a knock at my door. I opened it, and standing there were my parents, Amber and Jack. Mom didn't even bother asking if she could come in. She simply walked past me as if it were her own home and headed straight inside. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?" I asked in bewilderment. Mom waved her hand as if giving them a tour of my apartment. "Here's the living room. The kitchen is over there. And the bedroom. It's yours, but it will now be for Amber and Jack. It's perfect for them while they search for their own place. You can sleep on a cot in the living room." I stood frozen in astonishment as Jack took a look around the apartment, frowning. "Smaller than I expected," he said. "But I guess it'll do for now." As if that was supposed to reassure me. I finally managed to take a breath and ask, "What the hell is going on here?" Mom turned to me with an overly sweet smile. "You forgot that I promised consequences? Well, here they are. Amber and Jack are moving in." I almost exploded, but instead of yelling, I just smiled. "You know what? Fine. But I'll need a couple of weeks to organize everything." Mom seemed pleased. "Well, finally, you're being cooperative." As soon as they left, I immediately called Emily. "Emily, I need to close the deal urgently, as fast as possible." Emily responded understandingly. "We can get all the paperwork done by next week." I called my landlord and let them know. As soon as my lease period ends, I'm moving out. From then on, everything became a whirlwind: packing, planning, and preparing. Emily was working overtime to finalize the purchase with the seller and the bank, and by Friday, I signed the final papers for my new apartment. It was finally official, a big step toward complete independence. That weekend, I quietly moved most of my things into the new place. Movers helped with the larger furniture, while I made several trips in my car with smaller items. By Sunday evening, all that remained in my rental apartment were just the essentials to make it look occupied. That first night in my new space felt liberating. No roommates, no obligations, just me and my own life that I had worked so hard to create. On Monday, I returned to my old apartment to grab the last of my belongings and check my mail. I planned to maintain the appearance of still living there for a little while longer until the right moment arrived. Amber sent me several messages asking when they could officially move in. Each time I replied, "Still sorting out the details with the landlord." I kept them in the dark, buying time to close the chapter and focus on my new life. Internally, I was already making plans to personalize my new home. Everything felt fresh and new. I planned to paint a bright turquoise accent wall in the living room to complement the overall style, unpack boxes, and arrange my belongings thoughtfully. And, of course, I dreamed of creating a small green oasis with plants on my balcony, a peaceful corner of tranquility. By the following Saturday, everything was ready. I left the spare key to the old apartment under the doormat, as I had promised Amber. By midday, I drove to my new home with the final set of items. Just as the last batch of furniture was being delivered, my phone rang. It was Amber. I knew the moment was coming. I answered with fake enthusiasm. "Hey, have you guys arrived yet?" "Yeah, we're here," Amber replied. "Where are you?" "Oh, I got called away on a sudden work trip," I fabricated on the spot. "I'll be gone for a week. Make yourselves comfortable." I could hear Jack in the background asking Amber who she was talking to, and Amber relayed my message. She sounded carefree, and I could imagine her shrugging casually. "All right, seems like she'll be out for a while." Amber giggled a little and added, "Jack says hi." "So, is there anything we need to know about the place?" Amber asked. "Just that I've already talked to Mr. Benson, the landlord. He knows I'm out of town." I let Amber make whatever assumptions she wanted, allowing her to stay in her bubble of misunderstanding. Cool, Amber said. "All right then, have a good trip." I hung up, smiled, and continued unpacking the last box in my new bedroom. The week went by quickly. I went to work, came home, and enjoyed the peace. I was finally on my own, not dependent on others' decisions and free of family burdens. I didn't respond to any messages from my parents asking how Amber and Jack's move-in process was going. I had built my own life, independent of their drama. Exactly 1 week after Amber and Jack moved in, my phone began blowing up with calls from my sister. I ignored the first few until Amber called 5 times in a row. At last, I answered. Amber was panicking. "Sally, you need to come back right now. The landlord showed up and said, 'Your rent is only paid through the end of the month.' He said, 'After that, you either sign a new lease or leave.'" I feigned confusion. "Well, yeah, that's standard for lease agreements, Amber." But Mom and Dad said you were letting us live here for free. I never agreed to that, I replied calmly. Besides, it's not my place anymore. I moved out. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Amber erupted. What? Where are you living now? I bought my own apartment, I said, pride evident in my voice. I've been saving for years, and I finally had enough. So, you just left us without a place after a month? Amber's voice climbed into near hysteria. You have plenty of options, Amber, I said calmly. Find a job and pay the rent, move back in with Mom and Dad, or find cheaper housing. These are the same options you had before trying to occupy my apartment. Amber hung up. 15 minutes later, my mom called. I braced myself and answered. Sally Anderson, what did you do? She demanded. I bought my own home, Mom. I'm a homeowner now. I tried to inject some joy into my voice, hoping she might be happy for me. But predictably, she wasn't. You deliberately left your sister and Jack stranded. You let them think they'd be able to stay at your place. No, Mom. I let you all make your own assumptions, I replied, knowing it was futile. You literally came here and told me you were going to take my bedroom. That's because you refused to help your sister, Mom yelled. And now you've bought a new place. Maybe you can give Amber and Jack your new address so they can move there. I took a deep breath. No, Mom. That's not going to happen. I'm not giving anyone my new address, and Amber isn't moving in with me. Mom's fury spilled over the phone. She called me ungrateful, selfish, and many other things I preferred not to remember. I held the phone away from my ear until her tirade subsided. Are you done? I asked when her words finally came to a halt. Don't you dare speak to me like that, Mom raged on the other end. I raised you better than this. You raised me to be independent and self-sufficient. That's exactly what I'm doing. You were raised to help your family, she retorted. I have helped the family for years, I replied calmly. I helped pay for Amber's college, which she dropped out of. I let her live with me, and she brought strangers into my home. I've been helping since I was 18. Now it's her turn to help herself. She hung up. For a moment, I stared at the phone, then blocked all their numbers. Mom, Dad, Amber, and even Jack. I needed peace. A space to enjoy the home I'd worked so hard to afford without their constant attacks and demands. That night, I wandered freely around my new condo, touching the walls, opening and closing cabinets, soaking in the fact that this place was truly mine. For the next 2 months, I lived in my small paradise. I decorated my apartment with carefully chosen furniture, painted an accent wall in the living room a bright turquoise color, and even started growing herbs on the balcony. Work was going well, and I was being considered for a promotion. Life became good and stable. I was finally on solid ground. While not completely detached from my family, I still communicated with some mutual friends. That's how I learned that Amber and Jessica had moved back in with my parents. My friend Jane happened to run into Mom at the store, and Mom told her that Amber and Jessica were living with them again, and none of them were working while my parents supported them. Mom complained to Jane about how money was tight, and how Dad was taking extra shifts to provide for everyone. I felt sympathy for my parents, but it quickly turned into disappointment. They had created this situation. For years, they allowed Amber to live without consequences, and now they faced the results of raising a daughter who expected everything to be handed to her. One evening, I came home from work and checked my email. Among the usual promotional emails was an unexpected letter from Dad. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short, just a few paragraphs. "Sally, I don't know if you'll read this, but I'd like to apologize. Mom and I were wrong to pressure you into supporting Amber. We created this situation. Now it's our responsibility. Things have become complicated for all of us, and I miss you. If you're willing, please call me. Love, Dad." I read the letter 3 times. It was the first acknowledgement from one of my parents that they might have been unfair to me. It wasn't a complete apology. Nothing was mentioned about the scene at the apartment or the years of preferential treatment towards Amber, but it was something. I didn't reply immediately. I needed time to process the situation and decide what our family relationships would look like in the future. I wasn't ready to fully reconcile, not when the wounds were still fresh, but I was open to the possibility of reestablishing communication on new terms, my own. A week later, my work phone rang. It was the receptionist in the lobby. "Sally, there's a man here who says he's your father." My heart skipped a beat. "I'll come down right away." Dad stood in the lobby, showing more wrinkles than I'd ever noticed before. When he saw me, his face lit up with a cautious smile. We went to a cafe across the street, like we used to in the past, and for the first time, maybe ever, my father truly listened to me. He didn't try to command, didn't talk about Amber, but listened and tried to understand my perspective. He explained how things had deteriorated at home, how Jack had started behaving despotically, treating them like servants, and how Amber just followed him sluggishly, never trying to change anything or find a job. "Mom refuses to acknowledge it," he said quietly. "But we made mistakes with Amber. We thought we were helping her, but we just made her dependent on us." I nodded, sipping my coffee, letting Dad pour out his soul. "We were unfair to you," he continued. "Expected too much from you because you were always self-sufficient and confident. We took that trait for granted." Tears welled up in my eyes. This was the conversation I needed. A real acknowledgement. Dad took my hands. "I'm proud of you, Sally, for standing your ground and building your life." We talked extensively, covering both significant and mundane topics, about my new apartment, about my work, about his struggles with financial pressure, and supporting Amber and Jessica. We didn't resolve all issues. Mom was still angry, Amber was still unemployed, but it was a beginning. As we parted, Dad hugged me tightly. "I won't tell Mom or Amber about our meeting," he promised me. "It's your choice when and if you're ready." Returning to work, I felt lighter. The anger and resentment I had carried for so long began to dissolve, making room for something else. Not quite forgiveness, not immediate, but possibility. I still didn't regret my decision to stand up for myself, set boundaries, and claim the life I'd earned. Sometimes being selfish isn't as bad as it seems. Sometimes it's just self-protection. And sometimes, when you finally put yourself first, others start to see your true worth. That night, in my quiet condo, surrounded by things I had chosen and paid for, I felt a peace that had been inaccessible to me for so long. I had built this life with my own hands, brick by brick. No one could take it away from me, and now I was ready for the next chapter of my life. Did you like the story? Write your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next interesting story. See you tomorrow.